Good morning, everyone. This is Danielle Crawford, Grants Manager at the Skillman Foundation. I wanted to welcome everybody to our webinar today and let everybody know that we are going to wait a couple more minutes for more attendees to join. So we're planning to start the webinar at 11:05. Thanks so much for attending. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get the webinar started. I wanted to start off by saying thanks so much for joining our webinar today. And we are going to start with our Vice President of Program and Strategies, John Zeraldo. John, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. And I hope that you all will find, as we are finding at the foundation, that the Fluxx platform for grants management is something that makes our lives easier. It's significantly different and we think better than the gifts platform we've been previously using. We know as well that many of you use Fluxx with other foundations, and I think you'll find the basic functionality very similar. But there are a number of things about the way we're using Fluxx that are unique to the foundation. And so we're glad you're spending this time with us this morning to learn about that. Danielle, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have about program. They can certainly raise those questions. We'll try not to use the time on the webinar to talk about programmatic priorities, but where there's a connection between people's programmatic interests and Fluxx, we'll be happy to try to cover that here today.
Great. So John Martin, if you want to move to the next slide. So I just want to make sure that everyone is familiar with the three folks that are in the room right now. So it includes John Zeraldo, as I said, our Vice President, myself, the Grants Manager, and our Grants Administrator, Mary Beth Baumeister, who was Project Lead on this project. So as John said, I just want to reiterate that any questions you may have about the platform, we are more than happy to answer during this time. Any programmatic questions that you have, we will take back to the program team and answer them at a later time. So today we're going to talk about some of the cool high-level features that Fluxx has to offer, and we're going to show you guys how to get into the system, what the system can do, how to register for the system, and things of that nature. With that being said, I'm going to hand it over to our presenter, John Martin from Innovation Network. John?
Great. I hope everyone can hear me. Let me go to the next slide. So as Danielle said, my name is John Martin. I work for a company called Information Network. We focus on grants management systems and dealing with design, implementation, testing, and my specialty is training. Before that, I worked for the Department of Justice and their grants making wing, doing much the same thing. I hope you'll accept my apologies for the picture. I know it's a little older. It's not a very recent photo, but I like everyone to have a good image of me when I'm talking. Now, agenda, that's my joke for the webinar. Agenda, we're going to cover the basics of Fluxx, how to get around in the system, how to register. I think we're going to spend a very large chunk of time on registering for Fluxx and how to get your login credentials. And we're going to spend another large chunk of time on a tour of the grantee portal. When you log into the system, what you're going to see, what you're going to be able to access and deal with, take action on. And then we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics of the portal: grants, organizations, people, reports, applications, and payments as well. So we'll kind of just work through the grants life cycle in terms of what you're going to actually see in Fluxx. Now, one very important note for Fluxx is that we always recommend using Google Chrome as your browser. So the reason we say that is Fluxx does a lot of their testing and building in Chrome, so everything is set up for Chrome. So we want everyone to use Google Chrome. We say specifically, don't use Internet Explorer. You can use Apple Safari, that is also fine, as well as Google Chrome, but we do not want you to use Internet Explorer. You will find that things are different and that things don't work exactly as they should, and so we definitely want people to avoid using Internet Explorer as much as we can. John talked about questions really briefly, as did Danielle. I wanted to put this email address out there. I do want to focus as much as we can on technical or system questions. So I'd like to avoid, if we can, the programmatic or financial questions. Good rule of thumb, I think, is if you're using a specific name of a project or an organization, you're probably getting a little too specific for this, and this is something more for this email address. And that's what, as Danielle said, we might not address it now, but we'll be able to address it later on. We don't want to ignore your concerns. Now, this right here is a piece. This is going to be your URL, the web address that you're going to hit in order to hit Skillman's Fluxx instance on the web. So I'm going to switch over now to the live system, and I'm going to see if Mary Beth has anything. Do we have any questions in the chat yet? I believe we do. No? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue then. So the first page we're on is the landing page, what we call the landing page, or you can call it the home page. The login page is also popular. You see I'm at that web address, skillman.fluxx.io. I always recommend bookmarking that web address when you're at your desk using the system. Let's go through what's actually on the page that you're able to view and look at. I've got my username and password. So I'm going to be able to enter in that information. I'm able to enter to sign in. And I also have the ability to reset my password. I click on this, I would enter my email address, and I would go through that process of getting a new password created. What else do we have on here? We have this grant seeker. This is something that Fluxx has set up so that grantees like yourselves are going to be able to see what else is available on other platforms that Fluxx supports. I think it's worth looking at. It's a kind of a service that you would have to sign up for. It's free though. Then we get some information, basic information on the landing page about Skillman and about the programs and opportunities that are available. You see this hyperlink here is www.skillman.org. That just takes you to Skillman's webpage. This information here is more training about what you'll have to do, what we're going to go through now. The first step is to tell us about yourself. And that's what we're going to do when we create an account, when we click down here and create an account now. And you'll receive an email with the login information when that's done. Now here's that phone number that you can contact, as well as you see here. This is the grants@skillman.org email address that I mentioned earlier. So this is a direct line to it as well as the phone number. So we're going to create an account now. First page that comes up is the eligibility quiz. And so you've got a couple questions here asking you about your proposal and your organization. So is your proposal aligned with Skillman's strategic priorities? I'm going to say yes. Does your proposal serve and or benefit children and families in Detroit? And in policy and practice, do you offer opportunities regardless of age, race, creed, gender, religion, disability, sexual orientation, and ethnicity? So we say yes. So I'm going to submit. I go through the eligibility quiz. And now I'm filling out a registration. And this is fairly standard. We've probably most of us have filled out a registration form. You're filling out contact information about your organization and about the contact, the actual person who's going to be in there. So the first part of it, very important, is going to be this EIN portion, the federal tax identification number here. So this is pulled from GuideStar. GuideStar Charity Check, you may have heard of that before, their database of all the charitable organizations. So what you can do here is type in a bunch of numbers, and you see it won't let you go any further than the numbers there. And then you would click search. Now, I don't have one because that's not a real number, and I've yet to have a random one show up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all zeros, which will also work if you're a government organization. I believe the church works the same way. And this will allow you to continue to move on as this is required. And at that point, you're going to be filling out the rest of the registration form. And so we'll kind of go through this a little bit to make sure we're hitting everything. You see the very first one is organization name. So I'm going to type this in and say fake org. Now, you see that some of these are bolded, some of these are not bolded. Bold means this is required, a required field. You're not going to be able to submit your registration unless you have something in that field. That's a good rule of thumb to get used to in Fluxx. If you have a bold question, that means it's going to be required of you before you can submit. And we'll say, again, 123, Lake Street, city is Lake City, and code. And you see I'm only putting in the required information here. And now, we have a tax ID, which is really the same thing as what we looked at before, the EIN before. Now, this field is different, however, in that it doesn't cut you off at that number. So you'll want to restrain yourself from putting in those numbers. Now, this is the first instance where you'll start running into what we call conditional logic. And that means if you make one selection, that may open up other selections. So for tax category, if I put in 501c3, there's no difference. But if I put in other, I get a field that pops open that it wants me to explain what the other is. What is that other? You'll also see that down here with the parent organization, that if you say yes, there's nothing that pops up, but if you say no, you are having to put in the parent organization information there. And again, that's a good rule of thumb throughout Fluxx, that you'll see fields where succeeding fields are dependent on the choices that you make in those preceding fields, just like we did here. Now that's the first section, and it's kind of important to distinguish between the two, that this is the organization information section. So you're talking about everything for your organization. And then we get down to the contact, the who is going to be there. So if I say Dr. Illusions of Grandeur here, I'll say John again, and we'll say Martinson, just to be a little bit different. Job title is Director. Take number. Now, very important here is this email address. Now, it's important because A, you're going to receive email notifications. You're going to receive your registration login information at that email address. So I say that's important also because one of the most common issues we run into is that people misspell their email address here, and it really throws a wrench in the works before we're able to get that corrected. So be very careful about your email address. For another reason, I'd say it doesn't check that these are valid email addresses. So I can just make up an email address and it will accept it. So if you're expecting then an email to come, that won't come. Third reason why email is especially important, and one of the things we run into a lot, is not really Fluxx related. It's more about you all and your filters on your emails. You want to make sure that your spam filter is set up to allow emails from Fluxx, from it will say @fluxx.io, I believe is the suffix. So you'll want to make sure your spam filters are set up so that you're receiving emails from those systems or from the Fluxx system. So I'm going to go ahead and submit. I filled everything out. And so you'll get this screen here that will say, thank you for submitting. Within 2 business days, you will receive your login information. And at that point, you would be able to sign into the system. I'm going to take a break there and see if there are any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but that may just be me. Mary Beth, are we seeing anything there?
Yes, John, we wanted to address 2 questions that we received. One, will the webinar be available after this? And the answer is yes. Within the next 48 hours, the webinar will be posted to our website. And additionally, everyone that is registered for this webinar will get notification once that post is live. And the second question was, will our information be pulled over from the old system to the new system? And so that's a little bit trickier to answer, but I wanted to be clear that everyone still has to register for Fluxx. But what we will do on the back end is that once you register, if you are already in the gift system, we will connect that to your old account. And so what will happen is if you put in new information into the Fluxx login, that will be updated from your old gifts login. So those were the 2 questions we had thus far.
Okay, so we've registered and we've received our login information. However, we've come to that path. So now we want to log in. Now, for universally, it will be your email address that will be your login. So I'm kind of cheating here. I'm going to put in a grantee user. I'm going to log in. Now, this is what you're going to be seeing on your login after you log in. This is the portal, the grantee portal that you'll be viewing. And this is where everything is located. So one of the benefits of Fluxx is being able to really put everything in a one-stop shop, if you will. So the main portion of the grantee portal is over here on the left, this kind of table of contents section, if you will. But it's everything that's sectioned out. And we're going to go through each individual section in some detail, but everything is sectioned out. And then you can click on these choices here below, and then that will open up other sections. So the very first page we were on was the information page, grantee portal. And then we could click on people, we could click on requests, we could click on other things as well. Grantee budgets, grants, etc. Go on down the line. And it works like some of these 2 up here are set up as information, and they're a little bit different. The rest of them are really based on, you click on this, and you see that requests are built into a couple different sections. But you click on one, and then you have the ability to see a list of your, in this case, requests, or it might be PRI requests or users. You get to see a list of them, and then by clicking on one, you would then see the record itself. And then within that record, you have the ability to view it, scroll down, and you see the whole record. Again, in this case, this is a request. Another term for an application gets used a lot. You see we have the ability to edit here. That would go in and be able to change the information. We can print it here. And then at the bottom, we have some action buttons, what we can do with this particular data record. So again, that's kind of a basic layout of how Fluxx works, how Fluxx Grantee Portal works. So let's start from the beginning and go through these in some detail. Again, I think you kind of get the idea of how and what we're clicking as we go through here. But the first page is the Grantee Portal. It's got this nice picture up here. And what you've got here are basics about how to use the portal. And a lot of this stuff you'll be hearing me say during the webinar, and you'll be able to see as you go through. But it's really basics about how to use Fluxx. So that's very helpful in the portal to have that there. Now the information page is a bit more structured. You're going to have a bit more there. The information page is where you go to actually begin your applications. And so you see that the very first thing they're saying is, are you eligible to apply? And that's what Skillman wants you to do here is you have the ability to go to the grant partner section or to contact the grants manager, again, that email address that we talked about, grants@skillman.org, to talk about eligibility. Is your organization and your project eligible to apply? And then we're talking about getting ready to apply. As with any application, you're going to need to have a lot of information ready, things like audits, budgets, kind of things of that nature, and we want them specifically documented with these attached documents. Then we get into, let's start one. So in the system itself, we want to go in and actually begin an application. We're ready. We've met all of these requirements up here. Now we want to start one. So what we do is choose which one. We're going to go into a partnership grant in this case, but this is where all of the different types of grants would be located. Right now we see partnership and president's discretionary, but there could be more at some point. Let's say apply for partnership. Now at this point, what I've done is I've started an application. I have begun an application in the system. So what does that mean? Really, it means nothing at this point. I haven't done anything. I really have to hit the save button at some point in order to make sure this record continues. So I'm going to answer a couple of these. I'll say I'm not a for-profit, and I'll scroll down a little bit more, and I'll make myself the contact, and I'll say we're not doing this, and I'll just type something here and something here. And then I would save. Now at that point, I've saved an application. And you see this little yellow 1 here. That means something new has been done since I was in the system. So I would then click on draft requests, and you see now that I have one update available. This is what's called a real-time update. And so Fluxx is a real-time system, but you kind of have to click on the button to get to the real-time occasionally. So we click on that, and you see now there's the application that I had just started here. And you see these numbers here have to do with the dates, and there's a unique identifier here. But you see here that now I can click on that, and I can see the application I have started. And if I wanted to go in and finish it and submit it, I could do that. Now, one of the common things we run into in Fluxx is that people will be going to this information page and starting new applications over and over again, when what they really need to do is just start it once. And from then on, after they save it, it will be stored down here, or submit it as well. It would be stored in the submitted section. But if they had just saved it before submitting it, then it would be in this draft request section where that would be stored. So that's a bit about starting and saving an application. Now, if I went in there now, let's say I saved and I went off and had lunch, and then I want to come back in and finish it. Let's go in and hit edit. And so now I'm going to go ahead and try to submit. So I'll just hit save, and we'll go ahead and try to submit it. Let's see what happens. Now, this says I've got an error message. because I'm missing something. I am missing a required field. And you see here that I have a couple of documents that I would need to put in. And let's put this in because this is a field as well. And we'll try this again. No, it's not going to let me submit because I don't have those documents submitted there. And I could do that. We don't really have the time to do that, but let me walk you through a couple of the fields that you will run into in the application, and the document ones are part of that, so I think that's important to see. Now, if I'm in a basic application here, you can see that I have these basic drop-down, what we call Boolean or true, false, or yes, no questions, and you can answer those as needed here, and we'll just go ahead and answer all of these. And we've got a couple more drop-downs that you can use. You can drop down. You have what we call text area, where you can type in large amounts of text. These are still the yes, no. Text area, text area, text area, more text areas. You see here we've got some amount. So this is amount requested, what we would want from asking from Skillman, which is the amount year one. Again, another drop down, a date field. So if you click on this, you do have the ability to select it on the calendar. And again, with the other one, I have the ability to do that. Now, what we've got here are types of documents that are going to be required. So if we hit this plus button, what we can then do is hit this add files button. And at that point, I have the ability to add a file from my documents. And I'll just go into, let's say, desktop, and let's see, I won't put my resume in there. And so this now, I have the ability to label it, but I've already said cover letter because I've selected it as cover letter here. So all I'm doing now is hitting start upload. And you see this goes to 99%, and then eventually it should go to 100, and the little checkbox appears, and that means it's upload complete, and I've now uploaded that document there. So if I hit X, I now see in the document section, in the actual, what we call the document component, here is that document that I uploaded to the system. So I now have that done, and you can see now that that one has disappeared from this list. So in fact, I could then go ahead and attach all those other documents pretty quickly, and then we would be able to hit it and save it and submit it as well. Now, you've got a couple of other options in the application section, in that here we have draft, which will be the ones that you basically need to submit that are in the status of draft, as you see there. We have this section called request to revise, and that's important because that's the sent back. When we send back something for you all to make corrections or additions to, it won't show up in the draft, even though you still have work to do on it. It will show up in the request to revise section. So that's an important separation of how the requests and other items are going to come in as well. And you can see that for draft and for request to revise, you still have the edit button, and you still have a submit or a resubmit button for request to revise. Now, if we go to submitted requests, you'll see applications that are now submitted, and you'll see it's under review, but you no longer have the ability to edit or take action on anything for this particular application. So for submitted, those are going to be read only. You're only able to view what you entered in there, not actually what's able to edit anything any further. So that's a very important piece about application, about how to start and save and submit an application. And so I think that's another good point to take a stop and say, either Mary Beth or Danielle, are there any questions at this point?
There's no questions at this point, so we're going to hand it back over to you, John.
Outstanding. Okay, so that was the application piece. Now we kind of want to talk through all of the other pieces in the system. Now, before I do that, I had forgotten to mention this little widget down at the bottom, which is very important. Once you're in the system, if you click on that, hey, you can change your password, which is nice, but more importantly, you can log out of the system. So that's where you would log out. It's kind of hidden there a little bit. All right, So now you've got the basic architecture of the portal, and you've got the basic architecture of how we've kind of split up applications or requests. So a lot of this, the rest of this will be just repetitive. We're going to be repeating it, but we're going to go through each individual section a little bit. I go to organization. You see, organizations and users, people, are more about account management, about who the organization information is, or who the people are, what the information is for the organization, keeping it current, keeping it correct, making sure that that information is up to date so that when Skillman is looking at it, we are not worried about that information. So that's the first thing that you're going to want to be checking: organization. And again, people is the same way. I've got my account information, my people, my user information is going to be listed here, and I have that ability to edit it the same as I do with most other cards in the system. So again, this is about account management, orgs and people, really about account management in the system. And it works the same way. Now you can have the ability to have multiple users for one organization. That is possible. And you can have multiple organizations for one user as well, though that's less likely, much less likely. Now you can kind of see how we've broken this stuff down. We're not going to go into every individual section, but you can see that requests are separated from PRI requests from the investment requests. So that's something to be aware of. We didn't put any in here, but they would work the same way as the requests up here. They would be listed the same way. You see grants is really an application has reached a certain point that it's become a grant or it's become an award. And so this is where you'd be able to look at grants in the system for your organization. Now you see here that much like submitted applications, you've got no ability to edit or take action here. And so these are static. These are not editable. These are going to be read-only data points. The same thing again, just as for PRI requests, we have PRI grants, and so those are separated out that way. Now the two post-award grants management pieces that are in here are reports. So grantee reports, think about things like progress reports, final reports, financial reports, and then payments, records of payments. Now there's a pretty good difference here in that if I look at a report, I'm going to have the ability, just like I do with the application, I'm going to have the ability to edit, and I'm going to have the ability to take action on something as well, to have a workflow button down here at the bottom. So these are the reports, and again, you see it's going to be this little list view here. I don't have anything in progress, in revision, or approved, but this is the basic setup of how the report would look. And let's take a look at it as it's editable. And you can see got that due date, and I can say, again, a drop down, select my rating, and you see a lot of this is about outcomes, outputs, very basic work for text fields, and a couple more drop downs, text fields, drop downs. Here's a little rating. So we hit save again. And again, as you've seen, the architecture hasn't changed much here. As a report is due, is much the same as the application, the draft request application, a draft request section. So we would say reports due now has that yellow button there. If I went out and back in, I would see that there is an update available, and it's mine. So that really denotes, this orange bar here denotes that is the record that has been updated. Fluxx usually will list these in order of what has been most recently updated in the system. That's usually the order and what they're going to put these in. So that's a good thing for reports. Now payments is going to be more along the lines of grants, in that you're only going to be able to see your payment record. So you see that a payment record, this is one that has been paid already in the system. And I click on it, and you can see that it's very, very minimal here. It's just the amount, what the ID is. You can kind of see on the list view a little bit more, but very, very little detail for a payment record there. Again, because these aren't ones you're going to be taking action on or editing. It's more for your own record keeping, so that you will have a place here as well as your own where you're going to have all of your payment records stored for all of your Skillman grants, all of your Skillman payments that are made through Fluxx. Okay, I'm going to stop there and give it another break and see if we have any questions. Danielle?
Yep, we had one question that is about character counts, and we'll be able to follow up with this question afterwards. But that was our only question.
Good, good. I love it when I get no questions. So I think I've covered most of the portal, and we're really getting to the end of it. I think, again, I wanted to hit on a couple of frequent issues that we run into. Again, I can't stress this enough. You want to make sure your email is correct when you enter it in, when you register. That's kind of a building block of everything you do in the system. I will say also a special importance to make sure your orgs and people information is kept up to date and current. I would say every time you're submitting an application, you should be looking at that information to make sure it's up to date and current. Check your spam filter for your organization to make sure emails can get through from Fluxx. And I think that's pretty much everything of frequently hit issues that we run into. But other than that, I think we've really run through everything that's on the portal. And I think we can open it up there if we have other questions, or I'll just kick it back to Danielle and Mary Beth and say, thank you all. You've been a great audience.
Thanks, everyone. So if there are other questions regarding the technical portion of the system, we are more than happy to answer those at this time. As I mentioned, we will have the webinar available after this time. We did have an additional question, which was about your banking information, which is something that we at the Skillman Foundation will continue to require with every grant payment or new grant that we offer at the foundation. So that will not be going through the system. I want to make that clear. That's going to be separate in our accounting department, but that will be requested every time like it is at this time. And we can answer the question on character counts now. I'm going to kick it over to Mary Beth.
Hi all. There is a guided character count that is actually in the system. So in each of the sections of the application, you'll see that there is a character count for that specific section.
Yeah. So if there's other questions, we're more than happy to answer them at this time. Yep, I see another one coming through.
Is there a limit? The question is there a limit to the number of people who can create an account? There is no limit to the number of people that can create an account. We just ask that if you have an account that you continue to use your account and not create duplicate accounts for the same person.
Any additional questions at this time? This is not your only opportunity to ask questions. As we mentioned, you are welcome to send your questions as they arise to grants@skillman.org or call the foundation directly at 313-393-1185. So, if there are no other questions at this time, we thank everyone for joining the webinar. Just mention one more time that this webinar will be available in the next 48 hours on our website, and you will get a notification when it is live. Thanks, everyone, and have a great Monday.